This was supposed to come to you guys last week after me and my family had taken in a Tennessee Smokies baseball game, hung out all week down in Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg. For the Tennessee Smokies, if you don't know, that's the Chicago Cubs. Yes, the Cubbies, their double A team. Beautiful stadium. One to check out, their top prospect, Pete Crow Armstrong. And what I did see and what we did see was the Mississippi Braves no-hit. Pete Crow Armstrong and the Tennessee Smokies for over 6 innings would have been the first no-hitter that these eyes have ever seen, minor or major league. I know with me being as old as I am, it's maybe kind of hard to believe, but have never seen a no-hitter on TV or in person the whole way through. Have always, caught them at the end. But while I was down there, I also had sent out a tweet that had gotten some feedback from some guys that I have a lot of respect for. James Fox, he's from Future Sox. If anybody watched their draft night spectacular, they had it on YouTube. I was on there. But as my wife and brother-in-law and friends and stuff, being huge Chicago White Sox fan, it's a team that I also follow, pretty closely. So if anybody's interested in the Chicago White Sox farm system, James does an absolutely amazing job over there. Also had some conversations with Twitter friend. I've only met him once in person, Ethan Houlihan, working out basically a tweet that Jim Callis had sent out, and I kind of had a reaction to it. And it was about the Pirates, them not using their entire draft pool of money. They had, I think it was $16,185,700 to use. They had $312,400 remaining from that regular pool. But for people that don't follow the draft as much, you'll hear talk about this 5% overpool that you can basically use without any penalty. If you go over that, then that's when, loss of draft picks and different stuff comes in. I had sent out a tweet. The first part was definitely like a little bit off base. I had used Mitch Jebb's signing under slot as a possible reason as to why there was that remaining, and the whole time I was speaking about just that 312. If you want to use that over slot, I think that teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates should definitely take advantage of that as much as possible. But I was more towards the point of that, and also towards the point of spending that over slot. And it's not just giving away the money, because everybody would want to give away Bob Nutting's money, but more in trying to entice players. So the first part was, Mitch Jebb signed for under slot. Even the night of the draft, it was pretty much known how much he was going to sign for. The other players that I kind of spoke about, and it was Xander Meath, who is going to be called Muth by Pirates fans into eternity, and it's going to drive me absolutely nuts. But Xander Meath, he, was one of the players that signed over slot. He went for $671,800 over slot. He signed for, I believe it was about $1.8 million. And I had, heard through some rumblings and different stuff that, he was going to sign for between 1.8 and $2 million. So that could have been upwards of $200,000 of that $312,400. The other one was Christian Curtis. Christian Curtis, he fell into that, after, the 10th round, where it's usually like, around 150,000. There's not really a slot value assigned to that, but he went for 347,500 over top of that. And I did, kind of think that maybe he could have gotten, a little bit more than that, just because those are two discussions that went on a little bit longer. But my main point was of Daniel Cuvée. Daniel Cuvée, they took him in the 17th round with pick number 497. He was listed as 223 according to MLB.com. Had a serious commitment to the University of Miami. Thought they might be able to use, a decent amount of that. They used in previous years, and I'm going to talk about this, and I've talked about this before, which was Braylon Bishop, which he got about 118,700, more than the 150 that is kind of like maybe like the guidelines for rounds 10 through 20. So for that to kind of happen, I definitely thought that would make up that $300,000 difference. And like I said, I did have some good discussions with James and with Ethan, and kind of like maybe, came to a different conclusion as far as, kind of what happened with that. And, thinking that, the Pirates try to do what they had done in previous drafts. And what they try to do is, once a player starts to quote unquote fall, some of the explanation for that fall could be that the player, is looking for a higher slot to keep them away from their commitment. And even though, they may be ranked higher in the Fangraphs, the MLB pipeline, the Baseball America rankings, that they would end up, being drafted much later on. We did see that this player was drafted. He was drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals in the 20th round at pick number 605. He was 42nd according to MLB Pipeline, and that is Cameron Johnson from IMG Academy in Florida. I believe he had pitched in Maryland before that and went to IMG for his senior season. I saw him as a possible guy that, maybe at some point in time the Pirates had, tried to use some of that 5%, some of that slot that was left to be able to sign him. What ended up being left is kind of the thing that people are focusing a lot on, and that is the $1,121,685 that the Pirates had left to use of that 5% overage pool. And that possibly would be looking at a player that could kind of fit into that 42 range. And I looked at what would be the slot value for the 42nd player. That would be around $2,045,000. So if you look how much the Pirates had, total remaining, that $1.21 million, if they would, offer him, that much amount of money, I don't know if that would have been enough to entice him. So what this kind of seems like is that they tried to use a thing that they had used in the past, a strategy that they had used in the past to bring those players, with the best example, being in 2021, where their draft pool was $14,394,000, and they actually only had $2,500 of that 5% overage remaining. So they actually spent over their draft pool by $576,000. That's when Henry Davis went under slot by almost $2 million. Signed Anthony Solometto to $798,000 over slot. Lonnie White Jr. To almost $450,000 over slot. Bubba Chandler to $2.1 million over slot. So it kind of seemed like they were trying to do, something like that. But the other thing that I was thinking of is, looking back to Ben Cherington's, 4 drafts so far here as GM of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and to see, what, there may have been a time where they didn't actually, use their entire pool, didn't go for the over slot. And I know that the 2020 draft was absolutely just a strange draft, to begin with. But they actually had $87,100 remaining. And in their over 5% over pool, they had $644,825. So they didn't use the full amount of money, and they did not use the overslot. Like I mentioned, in 2021, they spent over by $576,000. They only had $2,500 of that 5% remaining. But even in a draft like last year, they did use all of their money. They went overslot for Tamar Johnson, overslot for Michael Kennedy. They used all of the money, but they still had $687,065 remaining in that 5% overslot. And something that even had slipped my mind until I looked back on it, it kind of refreshed my memory, is that in the 19th round with pick 560, we drafted, we, as in the Pirates, drafted Yoho Tejada, the right-handed pitcher from North Ballard Prep, 217th ranked prospect by MLB.com, and was unable to sign him. So, a lot of these times when you have these prep players, it's definitely taking a huge risk, or these high school players, it's taking that huge risk. So, yeah, the more I looked at it, when I first reacted to it, I'm like, I'm not that annoyed. But it is kind of frustrating that you left what could have been, at least $312,000, but it probably more of that, on the table by not being able to sign a cuvee and by not being able to get one of those other players to agree to kind of come to your team by offering them, what would be slot value for where their ranking would be, or maybe even a little bit over that to get them to come. So that is definitely, a little bit disappointing, but I wanted to kind of give a guess as to, maybe who they try to do that with, and it wouldn't really, work out so well. Another thing that I started seeing a lot of while I was down there, had a lot of time to think. Not really. We were moving and doing stuff all the time because there's a ton of stuff to do down in Gatlinburg, to do in Pigeon Forge. Was seeing, the farm system rankings, number one by Fangraphs, kind of all over the place. And Fangraphs, it's not that, I don't trust their rankings, but for me, the biggest thing was that I don't ever remember the Pirates farm system being ranked poorly, by Fangraphs. And I was kind of right on that to a degree. Fangraphs kind of does this ranking where, each player value, the future value of a player, from 65, 60, 55, the 40 plus, whatever it would be, gets a certain dollar number assigned to it. And at that point in time, then, your entire farm system based on how many of those you have. And a lot of times people have a lot of 35, 30 future value players that kind of start to, build up. So when I've heard the Pirates have had depth, but they don't have a lot of those higher ranked guys to kind of put their system over the top. So I just want to look back to 2019, prior to when Ben Cherington took over. This would have been the last update that was done under the Neil Huntington era. The number one farm system in baseball was the Tampa Bay Rays. No surprise there. Valued at $420 million, an average value of $7.1 million per player. And the Pirates that year were actually ranked in the top 10. They were ranked at number 9, a value of $219 million, with an average value of 5.3. So, moving on to 2020, after Ben Cherington had the ability to trade Starling Marte to participate in his first draft, the Tampa Bay Rays were number 1 yet again. They were $489 million at an $8.9 million average per player. The Pirates jumped the whole way up to 4th at $295 million, an average of 6.4 per player, within their farm system. Moving on to 2021, the number one spot is taken by the Baltimore Orioles. Really no surprise there as well. There's been a lot of big talk about how good their farm system is. Coming in at $368 million, a $7.8 million average. And your Pittsburgh Pirates coming in at number two at $357 million, 5.9 on the average there. So that's, pretty exciting. And then for the next year, the Orioles keep it. They're the money value of the team, according to Fangraphs, does not go down that much within the farm system, from $368 million to $364 million, which works out to be about $7.3 million in the average. And the Pirates drop a little bit. They drop down to number three. They drop by about $11 million, which is kind of inconsequential. But that's $346 million. 5.5 on average. And of course now, this year, with the update, Pirates are number one. And something that I kind of caught my eye is that the value of the system overall actually went down. It's at $313 million. So if you look back to in 2021, when the Pirates were in second place behind the Orioles, they were at $357 million. When they were in third place last year, they were at $346 million. The average did go up to around $6.8 million. But just seeing that there is kind of like less value in everybody's farm systems, and especially when you see the number two team is, the Chicago Cubs, team we already mentioned, because I went to see their Double-A team play. The Cubbies are coming in around $252 million at a 4.7 average, which kind of works out to where the Pirates were almost. Just like a little bit less average-wise, more money-wise, as the ninth-ranked team. So, I'm looking at the Tampa Bay Rays when they were in 2019 at $420 million, 2020 at $489 million, and the Pirates are ranked number one at $313 million. So yeah, they kind of do have, possibly the best farm system, according to Fangraphs. But I also looked at, Henry Davis is going to be coming off the list. Quinn Priest are going to be coming off the list. Andy Rodriguez eventually coming off the list. And those types of players. And even probably somebody that was like maybe a little bit lower valued in a Jared Triolo coming off the list. So I know it's kind of like a good thing, but a lot of people would just say Pirate system, farm system ranked number one and don't really look into what that actually means value-wise. And yes, it's, 6.8 average is the top that it's been, even when they were, like 2 or 3, but it's not much higher than when the Pirates were number 4 in 2020. So it's just kind of like a look to see, has this system improved? I believe the system continues to get deeper and deeper. But aside from, Paul Skeens at this point in time, of the players that are going to be graduating in different stuff, I know that, Jared Jones is starting to come on a little bit more, coming into the top 100 in certain circles. Anthony Solomito getting, conversations about that. So it could be that it could kind of balance it out a little bit more. But to me, it just kind of seems like more of like, what we talked about, Chris and myself talked about on this most recent episode was just, the Florida Complex League, and like how now we have, and within the Florida Complex League and the DSL, we have like 3 of the top like 21 ranked prospects and some pretty big signings, from that draft class, but the guys are so far away. It's really of, what we're seeing now is just having somewhat of an impact and just one of those players on this team that is just, that MVP caliber type player. With Brian Reynolds having a down year, we haven't gotten to see O'Neal Cruz. But, other than, Paul Skeens, as of right now, these numbers can obviously change. The future value of a player could go up, so they could go into that level. but not seeing that as much, and just kind of seeing that, over the past few years, the value by Fangraphs has dropped, but not as much as some other ball clubs. So then all of a sudden, are we number one? Are the Pirates number one by default? And that's just something I've kind of been thinking of, which led me to look at, there was a comment made by, someone who is, a journalist within the Pittsburgh Pirates realm. I'm not a journalist. I am a blogger and a podcaster. I don't even call myself a writer. I mean, some people that are on these blogging sites will say I'm a writer, for said blogging site or whatever. To me, you're a blogger. I mean, yes, you are writing, but even if you're being paid minuscule by the views or whatever it may be, I've done that before as well. But I've never considered myself an actual writer. I mean, that's kind of reserved for the beat writers, the actual journalists that are doing this. But it was a comment that was made, and I don't know if it was like just out of frustration or different stuff. I started talking about the development and how that works like throughout the system, and saying that, for the past 4 years, we've had the same developmental staff, player development staff, up and down throughout the system. And whereas, this is, the 4th year under Ben Cherington, 4th year with Oscar Marine, 4th year with Derek Shelton, that, this isn't really the 4th year of development up and down through the system. So they're saying like, our development isn't working in the minor league system. And it got me thinking, because I know that everybody knows this and still, shouldn't have to be reminded of this, is that, in 2020, there was no development in the minor league systems. There was an alternative site out in Altoona where they didn't even have enough players to field teams, to field games. So it wasn't like, you had like the Pirate City complex moved up and you could have your A team versus your B team and have pitchers get their reps and stuff. No, I mean, if anybody wants to go back and look, I mean, there were, coaches playing left field, playing shortstop, playing third base, playing first base, catch, whatever it may be, to try to fill out those teams. So like 95% of the minor league players within the Pirates organization, and with pretty much any organization, had no development. So to say that, this is 4 year of minor league development is kind of just, it's not true. It's just absolutely not true. And then even like in 2021, I mean, a lot of people would kind of come in and say, just come in and clean house, because this team was just absolutely terrible and the development system was absolutely terrible. But I mean, Chris and I have talked about this before, that, there weren't, across the board decisions made, even at the major league level. There were some coaches that were allowed to stay. There was some, within the scouting department. There was some, and the scouting department pretty much is a bad example, just because I'm pretty sure almost everybody that was in the scouting department is still within the scouting department. But looking to see, like, is this the issue? Is development the issue? Is scouting the issue? And not, making those hasty decisions. So 2021 to me was almost an observation year to kind of see what works, what doesn't. They did introduce, some new technology that hadn't been used before. The Rapsodo machines, the high-speed cameras for, the batters and the pitchers, to see like technique, to see, to work on launch angle, to work on timing, to work on all kinds of different stuff. But it really wasn't until before the 2022 season in the minor leagues that there was a lot of changes and a lot of additions made concerning player development. So that's why I can't say that it's been 4 years for this entire developmental staff, when most of these guys haven't even been here for 2 full years. Prior to the 2022 season, they brought in Dewey Robinson, the Rays pitching guru. They gave a promotion to Julio Sepulveda. and made him the coordinator of players and coaching development. Crabb was a former assistant hitting coach for the Rangers, and he was brought in to be a coach. Now a coach within he is the Altoona Curves head coach. And he was kind of like a guru within like the hitting world. Eric Munson, who is Indianapolis's hitting coach, he had been with the Gold Standard Athletics, which is when everybody talks about like the drive lines and the threads and treads or whatever it may be of all these like, you know, specialized places. Well, that's kind of where he came from. He had been there for 8 years. And so they thought outside the box and brought him in as the Indians hitting coach. You had Quentin Brown brought in as the complex hitting coach down there in Pirate City. And the biggest thing is that they brought in an integrated baseball performance coach at each level. So that was just introduced within these past 2 years. And something that I've mentioned, you know, a few times here is that John Baker, who's pretty much like, I call him the GM of the minor leagues, but he calls himself, he is the coordinator of coaching and player development. He was former, you know, mental health skills coach within the Chicago Cubs organization, brought in Chad Noble, who had been the Cubs bullpen catcher, and had him be a roving catching instructor throughout the minor leagues because they thought that was something that they needed. And the other thing is that even this year, they made an adjustment. Before the 2023 season, Mike Gonzalez, a guy that a lot of people have probably seen but didn't know who he was the Pirates' major league interpreter. He went down and he got a new position as the mental health skills coach in Pirate City because of all of the Latin-speaking players and players, you know, that were going to be coming to the FCL to try to, you know, help integrate and to help, you know, I guess get them adjusted to being stateside, because that's something that a lot of, you know, people have talked about through the years. It has been very difficult to deal with. So for somebody to come in and say, like, this is entirely for the past 4 years, the same developmental staff that it's almost like needing to clean house again. Like, to me, like, at least, you know, be truthful in saying, like, it's saying, like, okay, if you don't like Oscar Marin, you don't like Andy Haynes, you don't like Derek Shelton, you don't like Ben Cherington, but I mean, these other guys, this is only the second year they've been put in place there. And I mean, we'd have to let that go for a couple years within the minor league system to actually see that it's working. I already see examples on the pitching side, you know, with Jared Jones, you know, jumping a level almost every year and then also being moved up to Indianapolis so quickly. Anthony Solomito, I mean, Thomas Harrington, there's some steps that have been taken. So I just can't make that blanket statement across the board, and also just want you guys to have all the facts.
A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer, let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer.
Of course, while I was down there in Pigeon Forge in Gatlinburg, I was trying some beers out, guys. And for this one, I mean, I don't think I'm going to have to drink beer for at least the next month or so, maybe even 2 months while I'm doing this show, because I test tasted a lot of great beers while I was down there. So we're going to go with the beers that I drank at the Smokies game. 3 of them from one brewery and 1 from a brewery that I've had before. The first one that I'm going to go with that I've had before, I've had it from the brewery. I did not have this exact beer. I've had Wicked Weed Brewing before, Asheville, North Carolina. I tried their Coastal IPA. It's a hazy coming in at 6.3%. Just going to let you guys know this was the best beer I had the entire time at that game. Coming in at a 450, adjusted down to 400. And these next 3 beers, I mean, this is definitely a great Southern brewery company name. Yeehaw Brewing, I tried their IPA, coming in at 6.7%. Gave that one a 425, knock it down to 375. I tried their Kolsch. The Kolsch is a 4.7%. Gave that one a 400, knock it down to 350. And my wife's favorite beer while we were down there was their Cerveza, coming in at 4.8%. She made me go get a 6-pack to bring back home with us. That one coming in at 400 and 350. And hopefully, guys, I'll be back next week to be talking about some more of these beers, some other stuff within the Pirates minor league system. But until next time, let's go Indians, let's go Curve, let's go Hoppers, let's go Marauders, let's go FCL and DSL Pirates.